Hello, I'm Robert Picardo.
I'm Sylvester McCoy.
I'm John Bett.
And we are the cast of A Joke, and you are listening to Kneel
Before Pod.
Kneel Before Blog presents Kneel Before Pod.
Hello and welcome to another demonic edition of Kneel Before Pod, the podcast that comes to you from the doorway to hell, otherwise known as Scotland. With the recently released Hellboy reboot upon us, we decided to revisit the Guillermo Del Toro directed duology and talk about it. And joining me from the depths of hell, apparently he likes candy and TV, it's Andrew.
Hello there, and if you just give me a second, and I just need to put the flames out on my clothes, and then take a seat.
That's good. All this flame, we can't be having stuff catching on fire. That'd be a bad start to the day.
Oh, yes, well, and I'll hear nothing but complaints from the neighbours about it.
Yeah, setting your house on fire tends to rile people up. Imagine that. But yeah, so we are here to talk about Hellboy, the previous films. We've got a reboot coming out soon, so it's a good time to talk about it. But first, let's descend into our award-winning, haven't decided what award it's won yet, but award-winning Kneel Before Rise Again segment.
Okay, well, my Kneel Before, it's about the remake of Child's Play, which is currently in production. No, I'm not kneeling before that in itself, because I think it's a terrible idea, and just completely unnecessary. But the aspect of it that I am kneeling before is the announcement that Chucky in Chucky the Killer Doll in the film is going to be voiced by Mark Hamill.
Is he going to be doing his Joker voice?
Well, there wasn't any details as to what kind of voice he was going to be doing. But
he's going to be doing his Joker voice.
It would be pretty cool if he did.
What else is he going to do? That's why he's cast, probably. Am I to understand, I haven't actually seen them in a long time, but are the Child's Play movies any good? I feel like they're that kind of horror franchise that's had so many entries that it's ceased to be anything resembling what it once was.
Well, it's kind of variable, because what the franchise actually is has kept on changing as it's gone along. Because like the original one is pretty good. Yeah, and the second two, like Child's Play 2 and 3, are just kind of average. And then the fourth one, Bride of Chucky, is actually my favourite in the series, and was also the point at which Don Mancini, like the guy behind it all, this is when he actually realised how inherently ridiculous the entire premise was, and instead of trying to make flat out horror movies, actually willfully injected comedy into it, which made the whole thing so much more fun. And then after one there was another one which was Seed of Chucky.
It's Seed of Chucky that I remember the most, and I really hated that.
Like the one with Jennifer Tilly playing herself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't so good, and then there were the two ones after that. It was Curse of Chucky and Cult of Chucky, which like went back to pure horror, like with some slight dark humour thrown in.
Yeah, I think I have seen the first one, although it was a long time ago. Creepy dolls are kind of all the rage these days, like the Annabelle films, of which I've seen one of. But you can make a doll look pretty unsettling. So I wonder if they will just lean into the creep factor once again. I suspect with Mark Hamill playing the Chucky role, probably more comedic.
I'm not too sure, because from what I've read so far about it, they seem to be going for just mainly a horror style, but. Yeah, but if there isn't like at least a little bit of humour in it, then I think the fans of the series would probably end up being quite disappointed. Yeah, because that's what they come to expect of it.
Could be tonally all over the place then.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, well that's something to watch out for. I'm going to kneel before something that's kind of hot off the press. The final, very short trailer for Avengers Endgame. It was released today as of time of recording, and it's another trailer that doesn't really show you that much. It gives you little tidbits here and there. Since we won't really have time to do a trailer breakdown like we did for the first one, it's just a quick chat about that. Basically, you get to see Steve and Tony shaking hands, which is a really big deal, and a big showdown with Thanos. And since they've said the marketing is within the first 15 to 20 minutes of the film or something like that, maybe we're going to get a big Thanos duel in the first 20 minutes. Like that's insane. 3 hours and 2 minutes. I've got my ticket booked for the midnight screening. I am emotionally not ready for this. But at the same time, I want it in my eyes right now. I can't, I haven't anticipated something this much in quite some time.
Yeah, well, the thing I'm sort of wondering about Endgame is just how big a role Thanos can actually have. Is it just because at the end of Infinity War, I mean, that was the end of his story.
It was the end of his arc, yeah, but I think the arc of the Avengers is to defeat him.
Yeah, but just in terms of undoing the snap, then I'm not quite sure how necessary his presence would be for that.
Well, my theory is they'll get some catharsis out of defeating him, but the actual main plot will be something completely different. Like, it won't all be about the rematch with Thanos. I think that they'll lop that off pretty early on, and then get on with the business of whatever the hell else the film's going to be actually about. The rumoured revisiting of previous films, all the other stuff.
All stuff about the quantum realm.
Yeah. I think the Avengers' biggest obstacle at the moment is audience expectations. Can they defeat audience expectations? If I were the Russo brothers, I'd be pretty nervous right now. What if it's crap? If they don't like it? I almost feel like this film needs to be either a 5-star experience or a 1-star experience. Anything in between will just be, unacceptable. It either needs to be the best thing ever made or the worst thing ever made.
Yeah, mediocrity will not be tolerated.
Yeah, that's it. Like, it was, if I've been waiting this long, and it's like, it was all right. The stress I went through trying to book tickets, and it seems like Disney single-handedly brought down every major cinema chain in the UK's websites in one fell swoop this afternoon. So that's power. Oh well, I suppose. I mean, if you look at the architecture of a certain cinema chain that I frequent's website, then it's probably not that hard. I could probably do it. So, and I'm not putting that down as a challenge, and I'm not going to rubbish the chain itself, but it's not a good website. People that listen will probably have an idea of what I'm talking about. So yeah, that's my nail before. Avengers Endgame. A bit of a cheat, because obviously I'm looking forward to it, but it's our version of a trailer breakdown. I mean, I haven't really said anything about the trailer, but yeah, that's it. Buzzing. Absolutely buzzing. So, on to Rise Against.
Right, I am rising against the first trailer and just generally the whole concept of the Pennyworth series. Now this is a series which is being touted as a prequel to Gotham. Yeah, but is it
actually a prequel to Gotham?
Well, that's what it's been written in places, and yes, and for sake of anyone who might not know, this is a series which is about young Alfred Pennyworth, who's like the butler of Batman.
Butler, yes. Surrogate father, chief identity keeper, all that stuff.
Voice of reason. And the series will be focusing on his younger years as a former SES soldier, and getting into various espionage escapades. And I just don't care. It's the simplest way I can put it. Because honestly, I think Alfred is most interesting as a character when any part any aspect of his past is only alluded to. Because I think the vaguer it stays about the things that he's done and the person that he was, actually makes him a more interesting person that way, and a more compelling character.
Well, it's always the problem with prequels, isn't it? I'm going to keep kicking Solo when it's down, but Han Solo was not interesting before A New Hope. That's the point. When they talk about the origin story for characters is usually when you first meet them. So, if a character is supposed to have some mystery around them, it's not because we're supposed to see that mystery. It's because they are supposed to be mysterious. That's how they were written. That's the idea. So this kind of strikes me a bit like that. It's a story that nobody needs to see. Is it the same producers as Gotham, or is there some crossover?
I've not actually checked.
Yeah, me neither. Who knows? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But so the problem I have with this, I watched the trailer. It just looks like a kind of spy TV show that just happens to have a character called Alfred Pennyworth in it. So your audience is obviously the audience you're looking for are Batman fans, right? So they'll get 2 episodes in and realise there is no Batman stuff in this. Nothing I like about the Batman mythos is here, other than they mention cities that are not real in our world, or whatever else, or countries that aren't real. He'll get Corto Maltese because that's a country that only exists in DC, and stuff like that. It's who cares? But he's just doing spy stuff because you can't have any of the weird crap because that doesn't kick in until much later, unless they are going to have a load of weird stuff in there. In which case, it's going to be this we should have had a Batman decades ago. Yeah, so it's kind of nonsensical in that respect. So it's just a spy show with a guy called Alfred in it, and I suppose the connection to Batman will be very slight.
If at all, any.
Yeah, and it's, when they had visions of Gotham being a gritty police procedural in its first season, and it turns out the writers were nowhere near capable enough of delivering that. And also, it's just their tone was all over the place, and eventually they just decided to introduce all the Batman stuff anyway, just because, that's what fans want. But you won't be able to do that here. I'm looking forward to the episode titled A Ruby the Size of a Tangerine. So that'll be my favourite episode, I've decided. He does sound a bit Michael Caine-esque when he talks, doesn't he?
Yeah, I did pick up on that, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I agree. I'm not looking forward to this. I probably won't even watch it. I wonder how far in advance the joke in Teen Titans Go to the Movies about Batman's butler as a movie predates the actual greenlighting of this TV series, because it could be one of those things where holy crap, that actually happened.
Or perhaps someone watched the Teen Titans Go movies and thought, hang on a minute.
Well, if you think about how far in advance an animated movie script would be written, and they'd start recording it and animating it and stuff like that, you're probably talking well in advance of when the thing was announced. When that joke existed. Not so much when it was played to the public, but that joke probably existed long before this series was announced. So that's something to think about. We can look forward to the Batmobile and the utility belt Solo stuff in the near future. Batmobile will be like Knight Rider, but with the Batmobile. Which might be alright, actually.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I might actually watch that.
Yeah, not looking forward to that either. It's a good rise against. I'd forgotten about that, otherwise I would have been annoyed that you poached mine. Instead, my one is something I'm far more annoyed at, but I'm not that bothered by it, to be honest. But Sonequa Martin Green has announced, she hasn't announced, it has been announced that she's going to appear in Space Jam 2. Haven't you got better things to do? You're doing well in Star Trek Discovery, why are you sullying yourself with this obvious crap? There's no way this can be good, surely. The first Space Jam isn't good. I don't care what anybody says, it's terrible. I had some novelty value out of it when I was a kid because it had Looney Tunes interacting with real people. But I actually watched it a year ago, and I was bored to tears because it was so bad. So we're getting another one of these, which is starring LeBron James, and Sonequa Martin Green's going to be in it. And why? When was the last time you heard anything about the Looney Tunes? Anyway, I suppose they're due for a comeback, but are they still a thing that's kicking about? Does anyone care anymore?
Honestly, I have no idea, actually. can't remember the last time I actually gave him any thought.
Yeah. I think I saw a Daffy Duck short on front of a film a few years ago. I don't know what film it was, or... yeah. So, that's... I mean, come on, Snake with Martin Green. You're doing really well in your career. You know, you're the lead of a hit TV series. Is this like Stephen Amell doing Ninja Turtles, just slumming it to pay off a beach house? Or something? You know, it's like... I could really use a beach house retreat. So I'm going to do this crappy film because I'm getting paid a lot for it. I don't know. So that's it. Space Jam 2 in general, and the fact that someone who's actually really good is going to be in it. That's a shame. What a waste of time for her.
Yeah, that pretty much echoes my sentiment on the issue. Like, a film that I don't care about, that has no need to exist, and wasting the talents of somebody who far transcends it.
Yeah. Right, so here endeth the segment, and now we can get on to our main topic. We are here to talk about the first two Hellboy films. Well, the only two Hellboy films, as of the time of recording. So, before we get into spoilers for these films that are quite old, just wanted to hear your general thoughts on the two films, maybe as a collective or individually. So, what do you think of them?
Well, I really, really like them. It's quite helped that Guillermo Del Toro is just one of my all-time favourite directors. I think he's just got this like spectacular, weird vision of this surreal, phantasmagorical imagination that can just seemingly conjure up all manner of like twisted abominations from nothing in it, and then do what's necessary to actually visually realise them. Well, as well as that, there are also comic book films, which is a good thing, and also have heavy elements of fantasy and horror, which are also some of my favourite things.
Cool. Yeah, so I like the films as well, although one thing I was struck by when I was rewatching them over the weekend is the first one ain't actually that good, I don't think. And we'll get into why that is, why I think that once we hit the spoiler section. But I was kind of... I mean, maybe in comparison to the second one, certainly it's a piece of crap, really. It doesn't hold a candle to it. And I think there are reasons for that, and I mean, it will all be supposition, but get into that as well. But yeah, they're really good films. I think Ron Perlman is the sort of actor to play that kind of role. You know, if you're going to put a guy under heavy makeup, he's a funny-looking guy. I hope he doesn't hear me say that, because, you know, he could probably tear me to pieces. I've actually met him once. That's an experience that was underwhelming, to say the least, but that's another story. If listeners want to hear it, then they can donate, and I'll tell the story on a later podcast and hope he doesn't hear it. So, yeah, Ron Perlman's great in that role. I think, you know, it's got they've got kind of good tone to them. The cast are really good. The world that's built is really good. I have read volume 1 of the comics, but that's as far as I ever got. So I don't really know or really remember how well they connect. I mean, I'm to understand that the writer of the comic was involved heavily in the film and was quite happy to have it changed because he wanted fans of both to have a distinct experience, which is fair enough. Plus, when you adapt stuff, you have to change it anyway. So otherwise, it's, you know, there's stuff that just doesn't work on screen as it does in a comic. But yeah, good films, hence why I'm talking about them. So on that note, I think we could just use the big stone fist to
right hand of doom.
The right hand of doom to unlock the spoiler dimension and see what tentacly goodness is in there. Any objections?
No, let's do it.
Yeah, let's bring upon the spoiler apocalypse. So first up is our Q&A section. We have 2 questions, so that won't take as long, hopefully. The first is from Stephen, who said, which movie did you enjoy most? Would you have preferred Hellboy 3, or are you pleased that they've opted to reboot? So I've already answered part of that in the previous section, where I said the second one is by far the best of the two. I do feel that we've missed out on a bit of Hellboy 3. Hellboy 2 certainly alluded to something that was, that could have been really interesting and really, well, I'm not going to say life-changing or landscape-changing, but, it was setting up for something that was going to be weighty, certainly. But the reboot, I think the reboot actually looks better than the first one, after having rewatched the first one without my nostalgia glasses. Certainly the second trailer is a lot better, so the reboot's fine. I think all hope of Hellboy 3 was gone years ago. It's just one of those things that was just never going to get made, unfortunately, so I would have liked to see it, though. And how about yourself?
Yeah, well, I certainly agree that the second one is by far and away the better of the two. Yeah, I actually had a similar experience rewatching the first one, because I hadn't seen it in quite a few years, and I did pick up on some shortcomings that it had, which I'd previously either not noticed or just decided to overlook,
or forgot about.
That too.
Yeah,
because the first film is very, very much like a horror comic book movie, which is no bad thing in and of itself. But the scope of imagination in the second film was just far more compelling, and just something with significantly more rewatch value. Yeah, and I would have liked for there to have been a Hellboy 3. Though I accepted ages ago that it wasn't ever going to happen, partly because of the number of projects that Guillermo Del Toro actually gets involved in and then drops out of, and though there's always at least half a dozen things that he's talking about doing, and for only one or two of them to ever amount to anything.
Yeah, could he not have made Hellboy 3 instead of Crimson Peak?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't think Crimson Peak's that bad, but that's another story. But I think I'd have rather seen Hellboy 3.
Yeah, well, and certainly with the way that Hellboy 2 ended, I mean, it was clear that there were ideas in place for where it's going to go, and I would have liked to have seen them realised.
Yeah, I think the first one existed in a very different landscape to the second one as well. The first one was kind of in the midst of this comic book renaissance that we're never leaving. Or seemingly never leaving. So it's kind of... The fact that it got to be as faithful to the original concept as it did is a minor miracle in itself. Because I was reading over the trivia, and there was stuff like early drafts of the script had Hellboy be a guy that turns into Hellboy, and, all this kind of stuff.
Oh, God, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, and it's like... It's one of those things that, when you read over it, it's like, can you imagine if this madness was made? But then you look at other comic book adaptations, and you think... Yeah, I've seen comic book adaptations that have as little to do with the source material as this would have, and they're always poorly remembered because of that. Because why did they make this change? It makes no sense. But I think there was some kind of a bit of testing of the water, and it seems like there was a lot of compromise on Del Toro's part in terms of making this film. The Myers character probably wouldn't have existed in his version of the film. I think that was a studio note.
Yeah, I certainly think so. Yeah, because his only purpose was to act as an audience surrogate.
Yeah, he's the guy that walks in and asks all the questions. He's Fry. He's
exactly.
The guy, he's the guy that doesn't belong to this world and has to find a way to live in it. And
but even when you're watching him in the film, it's clear that he actually has no purpose. His very presence is completely unnecessary.
Yeah, I think we'll get on to some of the things I like about what they did with him later on once we talk a bit more about it. But to answer Stephen's question, Hellboy 2 unanimously, and we would have liked to see Hellboy 3, but it was just never going to happen. What about the reboot? What do you think of that as a concept?
As a concept, I'm quite happy about it because it means we're getting more Hellboy, even though it's about a decade late. But but I'm happy that there is going to be more of it, and I'm also happy that the second trailer confirmed my suspicions that the emphasis on humour in the first trailer wasn't going to be the tone of the entire film.
What if both trailers are nothing to do with the tone of the entire film? They both showcase something that's wrong. They both showcase exactly what you're not going to get. We've all seen that film, where you see 3 trailers with different tones, and you're like, none of these are the film we're going to get. some of the imagery in the trailer is really cool. Hellboy carrying a sword while he's on fire, riding a dragon through like an apocalyptic landscape. It's like a heavy metal album cover. It looks cool, if nothing else. And we'll find out sort of next week what there is to say about it. So that's fun. Hopefully we'll get a podcast about that one as well, good or bad. So let's move on to our next question from Ronnie, common question asker. Both Stephen and Ronnie are both common question askers, so thank you for continually pitching in. It's much appreciated. Ronnie says, not so much about the movies, but why were the direct-to-DVD Hellboy animated films discontinued after only 2 releases? I did make sure to point out that we are not in any way affiliated with those that make these films. So what we're going to do is we'll bat around a few ideas and try to sound clever in coming up with theories. So that's the best we can do. I'm going to guess that they just didn't sell that well. That seems to be the biggest reason for cancelling everything, right? Not making enough money, so we won't make any more of them. The other possibility is the production team just didn't want to make any more. I think maybe Del Toro was too busy to produce them. Did he write them? I don't know. I know he was involved.
I'm pretty sure it was a financial decision. I do know though one of the reasons why Hellboy 3 never actually materialised was because the studio deemed that it wasn't going to be profitable enough. I think with each of the films, when they were released in cinemas, they made back the budget of the film and very little else, and it was only with the home release that they made any kind of profit off it. But really wasn't that much by Hollywood standards. So I think
see Dread for a modern example, or a sort of modern example.
Yeah, God, I'm still so annoyed about that because I love that film and I wanted more of it.
Well, we might be getting the TV series, and Carl Urban apparently has first refusal. So
we can only hope.
We can live and hope.
So I think with the animated films, I just assumed that they didn't make enough money, possibly not even making back the amount of money that it took to make them in the first place. Yeah, but either way, it would have been the studio just deciding that it wasn't worth the effort.
Yeah, I've seen both of them, but I only really remember the one where he got like stuck in the past, and it's apparently just a done thing. Just occasionally he'll just fall through a time loop, and we'll have to just wait until he makes his way back the slow way. That's the only thing I remember about it. I also remember it not being that good, but or I didn't like it that much. But I was to understand it's a bit more faithful to the comics in terms of just the world that it takes place in. Although it borrows elements from the film, such as Ron Perlman's voice and I think Doug Jones' voice as well. John Hurt narrates them, doesn't he? Or he narrates the opening to them. So I guess it's the closest adaptation you'll ever get of the comic book, maybe. Or at least for now. Or just a random comic book story. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, they didn't seem that kind of high tension, high stakes. They just seemed like a day at the office at the BPRD.
Yes, and the majority of those days involve Hellboy getting into fights with massive mythological entities.
Yeah, fair dues. So that's our take, Ronnie. I'm guessing he wants to see more of them. Maybe with this we'll get more of them. I don't know. Maybe a Netflix animated series. Who knows? Netflix like doing things. We shall see. If not, read the comics and do the voices, I guess. Try your best Ron Perlman impression. Well, that's the end of our Q&A section, so we can get on to the rest of our discussion. Talk a bit about the first film, because this is our introduction to the world of Hellboy. It opens up with, the classic prologue sequence, which is on an unnamed island off the coast of Scotland. The Nazis are, for whatever reason, building a portal to the underworld on this particular island. And that's how Hellboy gets through. It introduces you to the major villains. You get to see a young John Hurt. You get to see some ignorant Americans. I think that's pretty on the nose. What are you talking about? Why we don't believe in magic, despite the fact that we are here to stop magic. It's quite a cool opening, quite visually impressive. It gives you a start to Hellboy. introduces you to his love of chocolate. I suppose it sets the tone for the supernatural-ish, but almost steampunk style, techno fantasy type stuff. Like I like the way technology interacts with fantasy in these films. So it's a bit like Supernatural in that sense, where it's like, I've made these bullets out of all this stuff that can kill mystical creatures. It's like, okay, that's what they do in Supernatural as well. So I like all that stuff. Is the prologue faithful to what it is in the comic? I suspect it kind of is.
It is actually, yeah. I mean, it's actually the most comics faithful sequence in the entire film. Kind of. In terms of there being a ritual, anyway. Though in the comics, Rasputin has this really lengthy monologue calling on various cosmic powers to grant him the ability to crack open this portal and gateway.
So are all the villains there like Cronin and the Nazi dominatrix woman?
Yeah, Elsa. They are, yeah. Though Cronin is actually far more interesting in the film, because just in comics he's just a random scientist who wears a gas mask because reasons. Right. The whole thing about him being a quasi-immortal clockwork automaton is a complete invention of the film.
In my notes, I've got Ninja Sandbag.
I like that.
Yeah. Fair enough. But that's our introduction to Hellboy, or how he gets to Earth. With, it doesn't give you a lot of context as to what's going on really, but from there you get an introduction to the world through. Well, I suppose at first it's through kind of news reports. You've got Manning sitting on the news, being like, "Look at this picture of Hellboy. Why is it so blurry?" Which is a fair point when it comes to debunking. Sightings of the Loch Ness Monster or aliens or whatever else. It's like, why in this age of HD cameras are we still looking at blurry, out of focus proof of all this weird stuff that goes on? And so it's the idea that there is a kind of urban legend around him, but he isn't known to the public. So that's quite succinct and quite clever and very quick to kind of get you up to okay, there's a secret to be had here. People are kind of aware but not aware. It's an urban myth, it's the X-Files, so to speak. So it's one of those things. I'm guessing that people are on the internet on a Hellboy forum speculating about him, although I don't know, because the BPRD call him by Hellboy, so how did the public get that name? That's a question.
Yeah, that's just one of the things I never thought about.
Yeah, unless they overhear one of the agents talk about it, or someone who left the BPRD in disgrace started talking about Hellboy and it stuck. Who knows? Thinking too much about it. But we get our introduction to John Myers, who is our token human, because we need a token human. He shows up at the secret base, which is a very badly labelled thing. Was it sanitation or something?
You're like waste management. Or
waste management, yeah.
Something to do with like rubbish or stuff.
Yeah. So it's a bit Men in Blackish in that way, I think. You've got all this hidden organisation that lives underneath our world that you don't know about, that's constantly saving us and dealing with all the stuff that humans aren't ready to accept. So I don't know which came first, the Men in Black or Hellboy, but there's some clear influence there, whether it's in one direction or the other.
It is certainly a standard setup of having the clueless normal turn up for the first day work at the clandestine government division, which may or may not exist, and then having the inner workings of it explained to him and through him to us, the audience.
Yeah. I don't really buy that why John Hurt would assume that he's like the worthy successor to him as Hellboy's counterpoint, or I don't know, as someone who can handle him. You don't really see much evidence of why he was handpicked, but I suppose you don't really get a sense of who Broom, is it Broom?
Yeah.
Is as a character is either. He's just a vaguely John Hurt-ish white wise man who kind of is there to have the answer in that particular moment. So it's, you need to get rid of that character to have the other characters stand on their own. So I guess Hellboy is very much dependent on his father still at this point in his life, and I'm not sure why Myers in particular would be selected to fill that void or give him the next step. I mean, the character is clearly there because the studio said you can't have a film about a fish man and a big red guy and a girl that sets herself on fire. You need to have a normal person that the audience can relate to. But isn't the point of Hellboy is that he's a normal guy, he's a working class guy that should be able to relate to, or at least on some level, assuming you're a working class guy?
Well, that's certainly been my perspective of it, and I did really think when just when rewatching it that there isn't very much that gets explicitly explained to Myers, which couldn't have either been inferred by the audience without explanation, or just simply come up naturally in dialogue.
Yeah, because it's one of those things. I mean, the BPRD is very visually distinct, so you kind of get an impression of what goes on there just by looking around. You get the impression that Hellboy is just a normal guy because he already has that close friendship with that agent guy, the guy that has like a hairpiece in or something. I forget his name, but he dies. Clay, yeah. And there was an especially good point later in the film where Clay's like, "You don't think it's too whatever?" And he's like, "I'm thinking of doing it myself." And it's just banter, between two people that know each other well, and it gives you a sense of Hellboy's humanity. It gives you a sense of how familiar Clay is with him, and just how normal this kind of situation is for them as well. So, yeah, I think Men in Black does this person from outside coming into this world a lot better because they hit the ground running, whereas this film wastes a lot of time with just cutting about telling us stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and there's also the problem is that part of the point of Myers' character is for him to not have a clue what he's doing.
Yeah,
and for someone like who is stated is intended like to be a significant part of the bureau going forwards. Yeah, and then for him to show up and just be utterly clueless, it doesn't give you a great deal of confidence in his competence or abilities.
There are points where he is really competent. When he's clearly brave in a crisis, and he adapts to dealing with these monsters fairly well. So there's a suggestion that he is essentially the top of his class, but they also want to have him be like too by the book. So you can't have it both ways. Like, surely someone coming in to deal with Hellboy would have to have kind of an understanding of the rules, but also a healthy disregard for them as well. So, to help him find that kind of middle ground. But he is played as the kind of stuffed shirt at first. But there's kind of just a lot of stuff we don't need explained, like rotten eggs. It's like, yeah, I know what a rotten egg looks like. He reads 4 books a day. It's like, I know, I can see that. It's 4 books on the pedestals, and that bit always annoys me because it's like, what, someone has to like turn the page every couple of minutes?
Yeah. I mean, does there just need to be someone standing there all day turning pages?
Yeah, and it's like it'll be every like 5 minutes as well. It's like, I've read that. Like, that's a rubbish job.
Yes, and especially when it's established how much time Abe spends outside his tank. I mean, there's really not any need for him to actually read him on a pedestal while he's swimming.
Yeah, I guess I get the impression that he's far more comfortable inside his tank. Although he's not in his tank at all in the second one, is he?
Don't think so.
Yeah. And it gets to a point in this film where he's not in it again as well. Towards the end, so I think it's one of those highfalutin introductions. It's like, well, look at this really intelligent creature. It can read 4 books at once. It's like, okay, well, yeah, but it's still idiotic because you're turning the pages like one at a time every 5 minutes. So it's someone whose job to do that. Why?
Yeah.
Plus, they've already established that they've got like advanced technology, like screen-wise. So you can have some kind of screen that he talks to. Screen 1, turn page, something like that. Whatever it is, what it is. But having David Hyde Pierce voice him was pretty good. I don't know why they didn't want Doug Jones doing the voice. There was a period of that where he did a lot of physical performances, but he never spoke.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it was at that time, the studio people weren't convinced that he was a good enough actor, like to convince with the voice aspects as well as the physical performance. And it was only after a while we give the chance to do so. Then he's like able to prove that he is decent enough, like to do the entire role himself without needing to be dubbed.
Yeah, I mean Doug Jones is great. He's great in Discovery, as in Star Trek Discovery. Yeah, and he was good in the second one as well. I think he was trying to copy David Hyde Pierce's voice as much as possible to assure continuity between the two films to some degree.
I'm not sure. I was took it like to be the other way around. But like in the first one, that David Hyde Pierce was trying to mimic Doug Jones's voice. Oh, because and there is also a thing that he didn't want to be credited like for the role, because he felt that like the Doug Jones like was the entire performance.
And I suspect on set he would be saying the lines anyway. And people would be kind of bouncing off him and then it would get dubbed later on.
Well, I assume so.
Yeah. I think the introduction of Abe, despite all that weird like nonsense, is pretty good. And it's quite telling that, I mean, ignoring the prologue, it's quite telling that the first paranormal character you meet isn't Hellboy. It's like someone else, so it immediately tells you this world is way bigger than you thought it was already, because it's a film called Hellboy and we haven't seen him yet, other than the little child in the prologue.
Yeah, exactly, and it's firmly establishing that this world isn't just Hellboy. Like it extends beyond him and exists independently of him.
Yeah, which is good. It gives you that scope already, and it's a testament to how good Del Toro is as a storyteller, how about he kind of drip feeds you. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff that's on the nose, but a lot of really subtle stuff as well. I mean, Hellboy's introduction itself is far from subtle, which it's kind of supposed to be. It's very much supposed to be just off the chain. It's like, look at this is mental. There's like bacon everywhere, there's pancakes everywhere, there's cats everywhere for some reason, and the immediately just seems like a standoffish guy. He's like, who's this guy? Get him out of here. So you're almost not quite afraid of him, or you're not, but you're supposed to be a bit kind of
wary,
put off in some way. You know, he's somewhat off-putting, and that's good. And I think you do see that from Myers' perspective, because it is your first introduction to the adult Hellboy, and it's like, oh god, what am I in for here?
And then you get a moment where he just like, he's real.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he would have been aware of the urban myth of Hellboy, but it was probably something that he had dismissed, like as a hoax or whatever.
Yeah. And obviously the Hellboy and Myers, they have a bit of a getting to know you arc. And by the end, at least it's established that they've kind of worked out some form of an understanding that will allow them to work together. But it kind of happens because the film needs it to happen rather than it happens on its own. Because there is a point where he just randomly accepts him for no reason. It's not really built up. It's not really explained. It kind of works. Kind of doesn't. I suppose all his other human friends have been killed, so he might as well get used to this guy. And then he's dismissed with an almost off-screen line in the second film. It's like, you got him transferred to Antarctica. It's like, well, he said he liked the cold. But how would Hellboy have the power to do that? He has no influence within the organisation. How would he have got him transferred?
The other thing that was something we were supposed to think too much about. It was more just like a brief justification and acknowledgement of the character not being there.
Yeah. And, of course, Myers is also there for a love triangle, my least favourite thing in fiction.
Yes.
Although it would serve him well in preparation for his current role on the CW, where he is the white lighter to the Charmed Ones. It's that actor. I forget his name, but that's him. He hasn't aged that much, actually, since that film, so good on him, I suppose.
So, sorry, what's again?
Charmed.
Oh, right.
The new one.
All
Obviously.
right. No, I've actually not watched that at all.
I'm up to date with it for some reason. It's like car crash TV, but it's kind of enjoyingly car crash TV in some respects. But yeah, the love triangle. So you introduce Liz, who sets herself on fire, or sets other things on fire. She doesn't actually catch fire. And it's kind of linked to some kind of psychological condition that we don't really find out that much about, to be honest. It's just that she catches fire and it upsets her. That's about as deep as it goes. She killed her parents or something like that by accident when she was a kid.
Yeah, because it has that sort of flashback / nightmare. I think that just seems to be implying that after being taunted by too much by some neighbourhood kids, that she lost it, and and kind of went nuclear. Yeah,
your basic X-Men mutant origin type story.
Yes. I can't control my powers, therefore I will be afraid of them and let them control me.
Yeah. Is she a character in the comics, or
she is? Yes. Yeah. Though there was never any hint of romance between her and Hellboy. That was something completely shoved into the film.
And I think it works. I think the relationship is natural enough. You know, the fact he sneaks out to go see her, and they just chat away. So it's clear there has been a relationship that she walked away from for her own reasons. It works well enough. I think in the second one it works better, but in that one it works well enough. And then you've got Myers, who is the symbol of normalcy. He takes her a ride in a cab and takes her out for coffee as Hellboy stalks them and throws stones at them, and shares cookies with a kid, which is a great scene. But I don't really get much out of the Myers and Liz relationship. It doesn't work.
Oh, I think the point of it was for Myers to just be an obstacle, because with him representing the normal life that Liz wants, whereas being with Hellboy and Bureau was somewhere where she belonged, but she didn't want to accept that.
Yeah, but she's clearly not interested in Myers at all. You know, any move he makes on her, she's like, "Oh, for God's sake." Which is really funny. So I don't think the obstacle thing works. I think Hellboy is seeing things that aren't there, which is more the point. And I wonder if this part of Del Toro's, I don't want this character to be in my film, so I'm not going to let him achieve anything. I'm not going to let him get anywhere with Liz because I don't want that to happen. That was something I never needed in my film.
Well, I would like to think that he wouldn't quite be that petty, but but yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you get past it. It's like, you said you wanted a love triangle. I gave you a love triangle. It's like, fine. He would sound a lot more Spanish when he said that, though. But yeah, it just doesn't really work, because especially at the end when they're having that kind of, when Myers is having that, do you have feelings for me? Desperate conversation when they're in the catacombs of this this tomb, wandering about. It's just, the puzzle tomb. Be a great video game.
Yeah. And Liz is just like, really? You want to do this now?
Yeah, and there's also a weird point where she can't control her powers and is afraid of them, and then she's in full control of her powers and not afraid of them. And you never really get that midpoint where she gets to accept them. Yeah,
because it would have been her acceptance of her powers, which would have stopped them from overwhelming her. Yeah, but as you mentioned, there's not really any point where we see that. So yeah, so it just kind of comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, and why does her flame color change between films? That bugs me. I don't know why it happens.
Perhaps because orangey yellow flame effects are cheaper than blue flame effects. I don't know. Maybe. I'm just guessing.
The blue flame effect was unique, though, because you wouldn't normally see that. And obviously a blue flame means it's perfect combustion, whereas a yellow flame is or orange flame is imperfect combustion.
Yes, which is something you vaguely remember from standard grade chemistry.
Yeah, high school chemistry for the win. So the world that Hellboy lives in, I've pointed out the little flourishes they do to help flesh it out, and you've got all this kind of, they consult a book and it tells you everything you need to know about this monster. That's all good stuff. But I think the actual mythology of Hellboy himself is actually very poorly done in this film. It's, okay, you're the key to this door, we'll open this door, this is your, destiny. But that's all they say about it. They don't say anything else. It doesn't give you any more than that. So you get this bit where it's, he puts his arm in the lock because Liz will die otherwise, which is, the most boring motivation you can think of for anybody doing anything, because it's always the case in these in fantasy or sci-fi or whatever. The love of my life is in peril again. I must sacrifice myself for this.
Yes. I must do this thing the villain wants to save their life.
Yeah, despite the fact he said, if you put your arm in this lock, the world will end. It's, priorities. The world will end. By the way, Liz kind of in that world too. So either way, she's dead. But they talk about him being like this, the son of the fallen one or whatever else, and that's all you get. You don't get what that means. You don't get what his role in the apocalypse is. You don't get anything other than a kind of fantasy flash forward of him sitting over a ruined world. But there's no context, so I found it difficult to care about what that means.
I think the idea was just the small details of his backstory, and we were only given them because they were the only parts which were relevant to this particular moment of the story. But without any larger context in which to place them, then they just kind of become statements. Yeah, you're just hearing. I like the son of the fallen one, and destined to bring about the destruction of the world. And it's okay, and it's like they just think that this thing doesn't go in any way beyond that.
Yeah, because I had a bunch of questions like, who is the fallen one? Why is being his son significant? Why does it have to be his big rock arm that opens the door? What is beyond this door? What happens in this apocalypse? What's he supposed to do? Why does Rasputin want the apocalypse to happen? What role will he play in that? It's just this. It's this kind of end of video game stuff at the end, and you don't really get any of the context. As you said, I think it's it feels like they almost ran out of money and couldn't finish the story, or ran out of time and couldn't finish the story,
or they couldn't figure out a way to actually impart the information which wouldn't feel like a gigantic info dump.
Yeah, because I guess they wouldn't have the budget to do all the apocalyptic stuff. So, yeah, so it's disappointing in that respect, because it's just one of those things that just kind of feels like empty stakes. Because in order to make the stakes feel real, you have to see that worst case scenario play out and then have it resolved. And to be fair, it looks like the new film will do that. It does look like at least a portion of the film is set in this kind of wasteland of a world where Hellboy has, at least in some part, accepted his quote-unquote destiny and perhaps rejected it. Which means flying around on a dragon with a big sword. Mm-hmm. Which, heavy metal album cover, fine.
Whereas in this film, the only hint of apocalyptic devastation that we get, it was a sky beam shooting off towards the moon, and then some Lovecraftian tentacles kind of spiraling down it.
Is this the first sky beam?
I was actually discussing that with Jana. While we were rewatching it, and I was struggling to think of an earlier example.
Yeah, it's one for you listeners, because I can't be bothered researching it. Could be Hellboy, who knows? That was another thing I thought was a bit dull. Was that, oh look, this other world is a giant tentacle monster. How thrilling. And when he fights the one that is birthed out of Rasputin, alien style, that grows, really quickly, and is defeated by a bunch of grenades.
by blowing it up.
Yeah, it's not all that threatening. Fine. It's design-wise, it's kind of boring. It's just a mass of tentacles, and it's this big mass of tentacles that's just hanging around outside the portal, just waiting to come in. I don't know. I would expect more, and I think if Del Toro made it now, it'd be mental. You know, the design stuff that you'd see all sorts of weird stuff happen at that point.
Absolutely, as well as the tentacles and eyeballs. It would be like a unfathomable, hideous thing twisting around itself, and just like something by its very very appearance that looks like some kind of like unnatural abomination.
Yeah,
like this just simply should not exist in nature.
Yeah,
and it would look awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Myers is really useful in that scene. He's the one that reminds Hellboy who he is, and then he rips his horns off, which is a nice moment, and it gives Myers that hero moment. And I get the feeling that that's maybe what's supposed to set him apart from his father. I guess I don't know. But I never got the impression of what kind of person his father was trying to make him be, or trying to help him become, because they don't share that much screen time, and then he's killed. He's killed because he just leaves the ninja sandbag unattended, which is really stupid. Post a few guards, strap him down.
Well, to be fair, I mean, it is actually more interaction than they have in the comics. As, in the Seed of Destruction comic, like where the whole story originated, like Professor Broom was like dead by page 10. Yeah, because he was killed by some frog monster that like dried his body out through these kind of like tentacle suckers.
Yeah, and as I was watching it, I actually thought that Manning would be the more interesting human character to focus this film on. Because imagine he'd wandered into the BPRD just hating everything. And then he could be pointing out all the stuff he hates, which gives you the explanation of that. Because I think when he's introduced as like kind of the head of the organisation after Broom's death, it gets the impression that nobody's going to like working for this guy. And I mean, he's a bit of a buffoon early on, but then they mitigate that by Hellboy and him having that moment where they bond over how to light a cigar.
Yes, we're not so different after all.
Yeah, it's like, I'll be using matches from now on. Thanks for that word of wisdom. But there's also this thing, all the stuff where he's like giving him orders and Hellboy's just ignoring them as well. And there's a post-credit scene where he's still stuck underneath the thing, which I didn't know existed until like a year ago or something.
Yes, like, guys, I'm still down here.
Yeah, it's funny. They all leave triumphantly at the end and forget him. It's like, guys, where are you? So that was funny. But I don't know. I'm just trying to imagine the version of the film where Manning just walks in and he's just objecting to everything that goes on, and maybe Myers could be that, although he's probably a bit young to be in that kind of a senior position. And
also like with the kind of like audience target characters, they're usually built up as characters that the audience actually like and identify with.
Yeah.
Whereas the purpose of Manning was to be obnoxious and obstructive.
I like Hellboy's characterisation in this film. He's very much a child. They say that he's barely out of his 20s in terms of how he's aging or whatever, which still seems a bit old if you think about it. If he's supposed to be like functionally immortal. Being barely out of his 20s when he's been on Earth for like 60 years at that point. Yeah, so what, he's only 2/3 younger than he... He's only half his age. Half his physical age, which seems a bit...
Yes, and so like being out of his 20s, yet sometimes acts like a petulant teenager.
Yeah. Hides in his room. His room's a mess. It's full of cats.
And also, by what metric were they establishing that he was kind of out of his 20s? Because it's not like they've got anything to compare him to.
I suppose there might have been some psychologist who evaluated his emotional age based on like human triggers.
That works.
Yeah. Although isn't Myers supposed to be a bit of a psychologist as well? I'm sure that's mentioned.
I think you're right, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a bit of an afterthought, but he has plenty to do, actually, and he has some good moments. I mean, I don't hate the character as much as, I guess, Hellboy hates him. Although, they very much keep them at a distance until at the end, where they're forced not to. And then he's gone by the second film anyway. Because the second film is very much, oh, you made Pan's Labyrinth, you make whatever the hell you want.
Exactly.
And that's the thing, the second film is such an expansion. Like, the world is way bigger, there's so much more to it, the mythology is hugely expanded upon. You know, I like the kind of fairy tale aspect to the second one. You've got the beanstalk, you've got the tooth fairy, all this stuff. You know, the troll market, there's so much in a single frame of that, it's just amazing. And the sort of larger than lifestyle to it, and I kind of like the contrast between the decay of the old world versus the new world encroaching on it. So like when oh my god, I've forgotten the villain's name. Luke Goss.
Noada.
Yeah, so when Noada is talking to his father and the other people that are standing around, it's like autumnal imagery. The leaves are shedding, they're falling on them.
Yep,
it's just like decay. And it's the bit where he does his his sword play near the beginning, and then as soon as he's finished, the subway drives past. It just kind of gives you that contrast between, so this is old world, and then here it's in the new world. I love that. I love that interplay between the two sides of it. It's magical, for want of a better word. And I remember reading about, before the film was coming out, it must have been something like Empire Magazine or whatever. I was reading it, and they were interviewing Del Toro about the second film. And I remember at the time I was thinking that Hellboy was a film that I saw a couple of years ago that I quite liked. And I was, they're making a sequel. And then the way Del Toro was talking about it and everything they were introducing and everything they were building and making bigger, I was like, oh my god, I can't wait to see this. He's like G'd me up for this, and I didn't know I wanted to see it. So good job in that score. And it's just an incredibly good looking film. Just so much imagination throughout, and it's kind of what the first film should have been, really.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because when you hire someone like Guillermo Del Toro to make a film, you don't then immediately put limitations on how much of their imagination they can use. Yeah, it's because in every one of the creations of the elves and trolls and the magical creatures as they were generically referred to, there's just so much imagination and detail put into every one of them. I say like one throwaway joke where it says, also that's like a cute baby you've got there. It's like, I'm not a baby, I'm a tumour.
Yeah, that was brilliant.
Yeah, that's the thing. But just like small details like that, as well as being quite amusing moments, and it makes you constantly reevaluate what you think you know about everything that's going on. And what it is you're actually looking at. Yeah,
and in some ways, the second film is very much just a day at the office as well, at least for some of it. I mean, it becomes fairly personal for Hellboy towards the end, but the mission itself doesn't have hugely high stakes, at least at first. I mean, the Golden Army is obviously this world-destroying force. But all in all, it's like they're dealing with little micro-problems throughout until they get to that point. So I guess it's almost video game-esque in its structure in that sense, where it's like, well, we need to complete this level, fight this boss, complete this level, fight this boss. Find the troll market, wear these goggles that let you see trolls, and then they'll let you in, that kind of stuff. I like the sort of workman type style when it comes to these things, like, I love it at the start of a superhero film, where you see the kind of a normal day for that superhero. So like the Winter Soldier, it's like, yeah, he's going to fight some terrorists on a boat. That's what Captain America does all the time. Or the Amazing Spider-Man 2, he apparently gets a lot of people killed while he's quipping and trying to stop a truck robbery. That's what he does on a normal day. So
that's an important aspect of of stories like this is you need some kind of benchmark events like to establish what is normal for these characters.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, for all the viewers know, then they could be averting the apocalypse like once a fortnight, and having to deal with these world-ending dangers is nothing new to them. But by showing them like small situations, which is established as no big deal for them, then when they continually escalate, then it becomes clearer as to just how significant the events are.
Yeah. For sure. In terms of like the continuing theme between the two films, I quite like obviously they set up the clandestine nature of the BPRD early on. So it's like, yeah, it's the secret organisation. We drive around in a garbage truck that gets let into like highly sensitive areas. It's like, I know that there's a police blockade, but we've got to empty those bins. So and they make a joke about that in the first one, where the news reporter's like, and now there's a garbage truck for some reason. Or a bin lorry for UK listeners. Yes, bin lorry. I'm going to use that from now on. I prefer that. Yeah, so it's the kind of weird thing. So it's, okay, yes, you're hidden, but you're also drawing a lot of attention to yourself, because why would they be letting this vehicle in during this situation?
Yeah, I think the idea of that was just because bin lorries are things which people see and then immediately disregard as unimportant.
Plus, they're huge, so it can be like a operating base of some kind.
Yeah, it has have all manner of monitors and scan equipment hidden inside them.
Is that kind of stuff in the comics as well?
Not so much actually. The comics they're far more kind of fantasy. There's not too much meeting of the modern world and the worlds of folklore that all creatures that populate them come from.
All right, so the films are very different in that sense.
Yeah.
But I like the continuing theme of Hellboy's desire for recognition in both films. He wants people to know what he does for them, and it's a bit of an arrogance thing on his part. But I think it's also a bit of a frustration part about, I'm saving this world every day and I don't get to interact with it, and that's not fair. So they turned it into a bit of a joke at the start of the second one, where it's like, look, he posed for this photo, and he's doing the peace sign as he's posing for this candid photo that Manning has to go to great lengths to suppress, and it's hilarious. And then obviously he gets himself thrown out the window so that loads of people see him in a public setting. Although, as many people saw him in the first film, and the secret didn't get out. He was running through a parade. He was in a busy train station. So, I'm not sure what about that crowd was more risky than the other crowds that he was seen in.
I don't think there was any more significance in the practical sense between those occurrences in the two films. It's just in the second one, because that's more significant aspect of the plot, then that gets dwelled upon afterwards.
Yeah, although it weirdly comes and goes from the story. I mean, you've got people shouting rude comments at him throughout, or at least on a couple of examples, and then you have that moment where Nuada's tells him, you've got more in common with this beanstalk monster than you do with human beings, and you're just going to kill it. And obviously you have the feared reaction after that, where people are terrified of him and resent him. But it's not a huge focus of the plot as such. You would think the acceptance angle could be a film in itself, really.
Yeah, because the significant thing about Hellboy is because he thinks and acts like a human. It's just because he was raised as one.
Yeah.
And so to him, the fact that he's this big red demonic caricature is completely incidental to who he is.
Yeah.
Yes, and the fact that other people can't see that is frustrating for him. Mm-hmm. He just wants to be accepted for the person that it feels like, rather than what he looks like.
And he kind of puts that behind him later in the film as well. At the end, it's the us freaks together kind of stance that he takes. It's when Liz directly challenges him to say, am I not enough? Why do you need everybody to like you? And then by the end, he's like, you know what? We're just going to live away from people. We're going to raise our kids. And I'm happy with that. That's fine. I'm also keeping the gun, because I like the gun. But yeah, I don't want to be part of that world anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the resolution to an arc in a film that's about that, but it's kind of one of those, it's one of those weird, it hits the it hits the headlines but doesn't really give you the story.
I think that if it had actually been like an important part of the plot, rather than something that just periodically weaved in and out of it, then that ending would have been far more significant. Just in terms of how it was played, it was just kind of something that happened.
Yeah, and I think the second film works so much better when you have it's the gang of freaks, so to speak. Freaks in inverted commas. I mean, they're not freaks; they're just people, but they look different. But the fact is, they focused on their characters, their relationships, and everything like that. And you get to see Abe let his hair down a bit when he falls in love with the first woman he sees, because that's what happens. And then he gets drunk and they sing, which is a delightful scene.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, and it just captures the humanity as well of these creatures that aren't human but are human. And I love the kind of reaction shots of the people throughout their base as they hear the music sort of reverberate through the halls. They're like, "What the hell is that?"
It's like who's playing Barry Manilow so loudly? Like I hear this.
Yeah. And the dialogue in that scene is first rate as well. The bit, it's "You're in love, have a beer," just so perfectly delivered. And then it's "My body's a temple." No, it's an amusement park.
I love that.
I have used that line so many times since then. It's one of those I bring it up every now and again. Every time someone says "my body's a temple," I hit back with that. In terms of the villain as well, I think the first film is very weak in the villain stakes. It's very much the comic book villain. We need someone for the guys to oppose, and I think like Rasputin and his gang could have been more interesting if there was a bit more focus on the mythology surrounding them. But as such, he's just an immortal guy that wants to end the world for reasons.
Yeah, because that's what villains do.
Yeah. Whereas at least in the second film, Noada had much more focus on his motivations. It's like he wanted his world to be back on top because he was sick of hiding in the shadows and watching his people die, and he saw the Golden Army as being the way to do that, which obviously was identified as being terrible. A terrible idea because it was a plague on the world before. The Goblin says it was the worst thing he ever created. They couldn't control it, or it could be controlled, but the power obviously goes to the wielder's head.
But since Noada's spent presumably thousands of years watching the world be slowly destroyed by humanity's march of progress, then he just reached a point where he feels that any way of dealing with them is just justifies itself. Yeah,
he's kind of been driven mad, and he feels like his extreme methods are the best way to do it. And there's so much depth to him as well. Like the point he makes about the giant beanstalk creature. It's the last of its kind. You should pity it more than kill it. And its death is played like a tragedy.
Oh.
I was reminded of the game Shadow of the Colossus. You've killed this huge, dangerous thing, but also this huge, unique thing. There'll never be another thing like it.
That's one of the things that I absolutely loved about that scene.
Yeah.
It could so very, very easily have just been just another battle against a generic CGI monstrosity.
Yeah.
Where it was clearly established that it's like a thing it shouldn't have needed to have been destroyed, and the very fact that something like that existed should have been a marvel in itself. And then there's shots of wherever it was bleeding, then there's beautiful plant life was immediately springing up.
Yeah, then when it died, lower Manhattan was covered in vegetation.
Yeah, I just thought it was absolutely beautiful, the way that it was filmed.
Although Noada using it to prove a point is a bit sketchy on his part.
But yeah, was an evil move on your part.
Yeah,
and especially when he said he says to Hellboy right he's about to shoot it. It's like, oh, isn't this what you wanted? It's like, no. It's like when did I imply that?
Yeah. And I get the impression that the creature's quite scared as well. It's not reacting out of malice, it's just terrified. It doesn't know where it is, doesn't know what it's doing. Just wants away. I just get that impression in the way it moves and the way it behaves. It only seems to attack to retaliate against something that's in its way. So like a helicopter shows up and it's like, get away from me, and Hellboy's shooting at it, so therefore he's a threat, and it's a bit like the Hulk, wants to be left alone.
Yeah.
And he's green as well. That's another thing he's like.
Green and giant and particularly strong and dangerous, which is why everybody fears it.
Yeah. And that sequence is also designed to prove that Hellboy will be a good dad as well. Because he's, chucking the baby about.
Yeah, yes, like to the baby's constant delight, judging by the giggling.
Yeah, which is really weird. I'm just getting thrown around here, and it's fun. So that's such a great sequence. It's probably my favourite sequence in either film. Just because of, how much emotional heft is behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can completely agree with that.
Yeah. And there's some, good subtleties to Nuada as well. The connection he has with his sister. It's not explicitly stated until later in the film, but you see it early on, where he's cut early on, and she bleeds as well. And, I mean, looking back, I feel like it might have seemed more subtle to me at the time because I wasn't paying enough attention at the cinema, but now it is very blatant. You do hover on Nuala's face for ages just to show that she's bleeding. So that connection is painfully obvious from the get-go. But it's consistently used throughout, so they can find each other after a while. They don't spend an awful lot of time on that brother-sister relationship, though. I'd like to see more about... Well, I'd like to see more about what makes them differ. Why they have such differing ideologies.
And I would have liked to have seen the kind of relationship that they used to have. Because you're certainly given the impression that they were once very, very close.
Yeah.
Presumably before Nuada's self-imposed exile.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder, if over time Nuala was able to feel like his anger and bitterness and resentment constantly growing, but she wasn't able to do anything about it.
Yeah, well, she's the yin to his yang. I mean, that's the point of her, isn't it?
Yeah.
She's supposed to be the opposite, and her sacrifice feels meaningful at the end as well. Her she stabs herself to put an end to him. It's appropriately tragic.
So I couldn't help but think, if she'd stabbed herself in the leg, it would have taken him out just as easily.
Yeah, it's the same in spoilers for the end of the Flash season 1. Where Eddie kills himself. It's like, just get a vasectomy and then. I mean, I suppose it's not as immediate, but and it's one of those things. I think if she'd stabbed herself in the leg, it would have slowed him down, but not stopped him. So it's the idea. I need to stop this guy permanently, and the only way I can do that is by ending my own life. That's what tragedies are. I mean, it's very Shakespearean in that regard. And the Golden Army themselves, it makes for a cool sequence at the end that I have some questions about in terms of the execution of it. So they fight them for a few minutes and then they decide, this is utterly hopeless. It's the bit where Kraus takes control of one of them, and then as soon as they gang up on him and destroy the one that he's inhabiting, he doesn't try it again.
Exactly, because he could have easily taken control of another one.
Yeah, take control of the one that destroyed you.
Yeah,
what's stopping you?
Because it's the whole point of the character is he doesn't have normal physical limitations.
Yeah. But I like the callbacks to the story he was told in his childhood. I mean, the fact that he was watching the Howdy Doody show and then his imagination was puppets. It was a nice way to subvert the, billions of years ago this happened type monologue, prologue thing that we get. And it sets it up nicely, like Hellboy asks the question, what if someone challenged them to a duel? And he sort of remembers that story. It's when the army first comes to life, and he's like, he just chimes in with "Howdy doody." It's like that's a callback. He just remembers it, and obviously that lets him remember the challenge, which is another really cool sequence where he's just riding about in the gears and stuff. Because it is after he gets mortally wounded, and he's like, "It's just maybe not the fight you should be in."
Yeah, it did engineer a reasonable enough excuse where fate of everything rests on what Hellboy's doing.
Yeah, I mean, it is his film.
Precisely.
Yeah, and then it's the, sorry pal, I win, you live. And then they melt the crown. Although Hellboy's like, with this power I could. It's like, nope, don't even think about it. Although the only reason the challenge is accepted is because, again, he's the son of the fallen one, whatever that means. I mean, you probably know what it means in the context of the comics, but in the context of the films, we have no idea what it really means.
Basically, just saying that he's a prince of hell and therefore royalty.
Yeah.
It's not really explored exactly why it needs to be royalty to issue a challenge, without going into the issues that I have with the concept of royalty in its entirety. I just feel there needs to be something that justifies, like, why would need to be somebody of some kind of royal descent or kind of noble descent.
It could be Noada's arrogance. He just feels that everyone's beneath him, and he won't recognise a challenge for someone he considers beneath him. So Noala plays on that by being, actually, he is royalty. He's like the son of the fallen one, and I know that for some reason, despite only meeting them a few hours ago. I don't know how I know that. Maybe I've seen a book where it's a picture of a big red guy. He's the only big red guy I know, so there we go.
Maybe she accidentally learned it from Abe during their mind meld.
Maybe. Whatever, though. But it does feel like that kind of harbinger of the apocalypse part of his life is over, a part of his story is over. It's not something they're bringing up, and certainly in this film, it's just a detail of his past that kind of proves useful for opening that particular door to have the challenge accepted.
Yeah, well, it's like was a significant aspect of his character. Like, he has this apocalyptic key, but he just doesn't want to accept it. Like, he doesn't want to play into what destiny presumes has in store for him.
Yeah.
It's like a bit like in comics when Rasputin was saying, I can tell you all about yourself, everything they are, like everything that you could have the potential to be. Don't want to know like everything you are. To which Hellboy just replies, "No, I don't. I like not knowing."
Yeah, and I suppose they're trying to touch on that here. Although the foreshadowing suggests that part of his life might become important again. Because you have the Angel of Death or whatever it is. That's also played by Doug Jones.
Yep.
Yeah, it's almost like the folly of practical effects in that shot because it can't move. You know, it's just kind of stuck in that position, which is kind of ominous in itself. It's weird. It's a weird image, but the condition for saving his life, it mentioned something about the future. Like something cryptic about the future and the end of days or something like that.
Well, there was a bit earlier on in the film when they were looking for the troll market, and through the elaborate scope glasses things, and then when we see Hellboy, like there's like a shot of him with his horns and this firelight around his head.
Yeah. Which is played for laughs. It's like, funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except that fire is actually called like the crown of the apocalypse.
All right.
Like it's suggested like it's something that he always wears. It's like this. That's always there and is part of who he is.
Yeah.
But because of his refusal to accept that that's his fate, then it's not something that affects him.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was still shown as a true and unassailable part of him.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the foreshadowing, I wish I could remember the ins and outs of the dialogue, but Liz has to make a promise of some sort. She has to choose him over the world. That's what it is, isn't it? It's like, will you choose him over the world? And she says yes.
I think I took that to like for the angel to be speaking hypothetically. Well, hypothetically in that moment, saying like would you choose him over the world? And in that moment, she says yes. And I thought like that would come back later.
Yeah, it also mirrors his choice in the first one, how he chooses her over the world.
I was just going to mention that. Yeah.
Yeah, but. So it suggests that Hellboy 3 is going to be about like this apocalypse that he refused in the first one, and I guess the price of his life being saved was kind of was the inevitability of it happening again, maybe through his children. I don't know. Yeah, I can't imagine what their children would have been like.
So, and also since they're twins, so then there's the potential to have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, we'll never see. Sadly. Maybe Del Toro could write his comic version of Hellboy 3. I don't know. But yes, it was probably setting up a kind of a cap-off point, an apocalyptic story. I suppose if you were to trilogize the Hellboy series, that obviously we can't, but I guess the natural progression in the third film would be to look back to his destiny in the first film and have that play in some significant way. Because I guess the idea of we can't have this post-apocalyptic world because the human race isn't really aware of the paranormal side of things. And then by the third film they are prepared for it, or they do know it, and I suppose the him quitting the BPRD could be the thing that lets this apocalypse happen, because he's not there. He can't solve things, and everybody, all their best agents have quit.
And so all we have left to be their army of red shirts.
Yeah. Because even Krause packs it in.
After being very simply pointed out, but perhaps being a stickler for the rules is such a good thing all the time.
Yeah. Although I suppose there's the suggestion that there's other paranormal people working at other branches, because he comes from another branch. But I liked Manning's adoration of him as well. That was hilarious. It says he has a very open face. Like, well, yeah, he does.
Yes, that's a very, very literal way of looking at it.
Yeah, and then the bit where he's possessing the, reanimating the Tooth Fairy, and it's like, what's it, teleplasty? It's like plastic, very modern. It's like, no.
Like, stop pretending you know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously, like, Hellboy can bring creatures and people back to life using his weird, his billet thing, his keychain, which is apparently not as good as teleplasty for some reason. I felt sorry for that Russian guy in the first one, though, that he resurrects and then he drops him down a hole. I mean, I'm assuming that he just continues to be animated, just, lying there, experiencing consciousness for eternity. Felt sorry for him.
I actually thought that the whole sequence was quite funny.
Oh no, it's hilarious, but yeah.
Yeah, just all these insults it was like slinging at him. I was just like, can you tolerate this guy for a while? He's so negative.
I was better off dead. Like his last words. That's weird, because that scene is quite tragic as well, because an agent gets killed. I mean, you don't know his name, so who cares, but
yeah,
still an agent gets killed. So, but it's also a joke.
Yeah, and that was actually put in as a reference to the comics. There was one issue which is Hellboy having to bury a corpse in a graveyard before dawn. So he's just holding it around on his back while it berates him. Yeah, but like every place that he comes to, then all these undead zombies kind of spring up saying, "No room here, no room, go away."
So it's a very paranormal world in the comics. Then it's very much.
Oh yeah, totally.
It's all fairly commonplace. And
yeah. It's these were very rural graveyards.
Right.
A lot of the comic stories are written to feel that they've been pulled straight out of folklore. Because a lot of them do use creatures and monsters from the myths and legends of various cultures from all over the world.
Yeah.
Yes, and but just with the addition of a kind of big red demonic apocalyptic harbinger, just slung in for good measure.
I'm guessing the character is pretty consistent, though. He's
completely. Yeah. He's got the same kind of dry sense of humour and just deadpan acceptance of everything that happens.
Yeah. And
the line at the end of the first film, just after he's blown up the god tentacle thing, where it's saying "That's gonna be sore in the morning." That's like a repeated line for all comics. After he's just had the crap kicked out of him in whatever big fight he's just been involved in.
Yeah, they're weirdly inconsistent with his strength level in the film, come to think of it. Like, he bleeds after getting hit by a stone in Hellboy 2. But he, can get ran over by a train and be fine. I'm not sure what to make of that, really. But, it's quite inconsistent with what will injure him and what won't. I guess it's for the expense of a joke or the expense of a shock. I don't know.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. How would we know the stone has hit him unless he bleeds? Or that guy just randomly picked up a mystical stone that was able to hurt him. Possible, I suppose. So I think we've covered the two films fairly extensively. I don't think there's much else we could dive into, short of going on all night about every scene in both films. So, unless you have anything else that you want to say that you didn't get the chance to say?
I don't think so.
Cool, me neither. I can't. I'll get I'll get off this podcast and I'll be like, oh no, I forgot to talk about it. Right, pull it in. We're recording again. It's like in the Star Trek 4 podcast where we forgot to talk about how bad the score is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but it's in this podcast now, so yeah. Spoilers for the Star Trek 4 podcast that you've hopefully listened to by now, whoever you are, listeners. I just want to talk briefly about the kind of what we know about this reboot. So, I mean, the trailers feel like a collection of images to me, so I didn't pay that much attention in terms of the background details. But does it seem more a reboot of these films, or more a secondary adaptation of the comics that relies more on the comics?
I'd say like it's just another adaptation of the comics, just like a new delve like into this world, into this world of like myth and fantasy and magic and gods and demons and everything.
Yeah.
Even though there isn't any narrative connection to these films, then it's still just being a part of the same kind of mythos.
Yeah. So I wonder if they'll go down the more technological, infused with mystical, like they did in these films, or do something else. It's kind of like the Jason Momoa Conan film isn't an adaptation of the original Conan stories. It's it's an adaptation of the Arnie films. So it's like, at what point does your source material not become the original source material?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'd have to peruse the trailers, or maybe I'll just wait a week and watch the film. I think that might be easier. We'll see what they're kind of shooting for here. It does seem like the whole Harbinger of the Apocalypse is the story, though. And they've brought in this Mila Jovovich character. She's like destined to be his queen, I guess.
Yeah, that seems to be the suggestion.
Yeah, it's not going to work. I'm a Capricorn and you're effing nuts. I remember watching. I've only seen Stranger Things season 1. I remember seeing David Harbour in that, and I must have been watching it not long after he was cast. And I was like, "Oh yeah, he's Hellboy. He's definitely a Hellboy. Like he's just, he just looks like he should be Hellboy."
Then you've also got the point that Jim Hopper's default reaction to anything is to wade in and punch it.
Yeah, Hellboy style. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the reboot though. The second trailer G'd me up a bit about it. I'm quite excited. I'm interested to see. It looks better than the first film, actually, because as we've discussed here, the first film ain't that great. All told, it's kind of above average, I think. Whereas the second film is, well, I would say the first film's like 3 stars. The second film is 4 stars. Because we've discussed problems it has and little like the fact that it's got a little bit too much going on and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's a safe 4-star experience. Whereas the first film is is what it is. And but I think this one, it exists in a landscape where you can just go mental with comic book adaptations now. Nobody cares. We've had Venom, we've had the Avengers, we've had Suicide Squad, unfortunately. So, like, you don't really have to worry about whether your audience is going to accept it, because they just are these days.
And now the studios have figured out that the way to get decent comic adaptations is to give them to filmmakers who actually know, like, and understand them.
Yeah.
Which must have been an astounding revelation for them.
Yeah. Imagine that. Give it to someone that cares what they're doing, and you'll get something that's good out the end of it. Oh, yeah, and leave them alone. Don't give them... Yeah, don't be like, studio intervention has never improved a film. Well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, there's little bits and pieces that have been improved, but on the whole, when you hear the studio interference side of it, you're like, oh no, what have they done?
Yeah, the one positive studio interference that I can think of off the top of my head was in Firefly, because it was a studio interference which led to the creation of Inara.
Yeah.
Purely because some executives at Fox stated, yeah, we want space hookers.
Yeah. I suppose there's other bits and pieces. I think I don't know, I'm pretty sure X-Men First Class had some good first studio interference making it happen. Of course, you have the infamous Fant Four stick interference that just. I mean, it wasn't. I don't think it was a good film to begin with, but I don't think they made it any worse. Maybe they did. No idea. Release the Trank cut. Hashtag release the Trank cut. It's like, no, don't make us sit through that again. Let's just forget it and move on. Yeah, so I think on that note we should end and possibly return in a week or so to discuss Hellboy, not to be confused with the other film that's called Hellboy. They haven't even bothered with a subtitle or anything, it's just Hellboy.
That's like Hellboy Rise of the Blood Queen or something like that.
Hellboy Hand of Doom. That'd be a stupid title. Well,
that was actually the title of one of the collections.
Oh really?
The right Hand of Doom.
I do have the first collection, and I have in theory read it. I just don't have any memory of it. I don't know. Sometimes when I read something years ago, I just forget all about it. I'll go back to it one of these days, maybe when I have time. So yes, thank you for taking a stopover out of your untold hell dimension to come and discuss Hellboy and Hellboy 2, The Golden Army. I keep wanting to say The Golden Compass, which would be a different film.
Yes, let's just not go there.
Although they both involve alternate universes, sort of.
That's true.
Yeah. Hellboy 2, The Golden Compass. It's like, what's going on? Although I would like to see him fight a polar bear. Voiced by Ian McKellen. Oh, I want to see that now.
Yep, that's all I can think of now.
Yeah. So thanks for joining from your hell dimension.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed the brief respite from eternal torment and suffering.
Yeah, well, anytime, but you have to go back now. So that's the rule.
Damn it.
Yeah. And I'm away to listen to Barry Manilow, which is another form of hell. So, that was our Hellboy and Hellboy 2 The Golden Army discussion. A special thanks to YouTuber Diane DeVito for his cover of the Barry Manilow song Can't Smile Without You. If you like what you heard here, then please hit that subscribe button in iTunes, YouTube, or any major podcasting app. iTunes users, please do leave us a star rating and comment. We really do need it. We're also on Spotify. If you want to talk to us about Hellboy or anything else, please hit us up on Facebook or Twitter under Kneel Before Blog, or leave a comment on kneelbeforeblog.co.uk. As always, we hope you'll join us on the next Kneel Before Pod.
Going through, I just can't smile.